morning, everyone, and welcome to the week 6 garden tour. I hope you're ready because we're in for a good treat today. First, though, it is really early in the morning. The sun is just now coming up, and that means it's time to let the girls out. Come on, girls. Good morning, girls. So just a little while ago, Luis came out and opened up the coop, and then we let them stay out in the run for just a little bit so that the sun can rise a little bit just before we let them out, because if we were to let them out right before sunset when we normally get them out of the coop, then owls are still hunting, and it's just a little more risky with those predators that hunt at dawn and dusk. So we wait just a little bit. We did install a fan this week because the girls are really hot in this West Texas weather. Good morning, girls. All right, now let's go see the garden. We're here for a garden tour. On my way, I'm going to stop and show you this cucamelon. He's starting to grow out of the pot over here and down and even around into his hanging planter. So that's pretty neat. And then he goes all the way up and down this tree, and he's almost reaching the main tree now. Hope y'all are having a good morning. It's been a beautiful week this week here in West Texas. It's been pretty warm. We've had 90-degree temperatures almost all week, some 95 up to 98. But we did have one day this week that was in the 60s because we were getting so much wind. There were 50-mile-an-hour gusts at some point, so it's been an interesting week. My marigold is growing up nice and tall, still struggling a little bit. I think where I have it, it just gets a little bit too much sun exposure. I think the morning glory would prefer if I had placed him in a little bit shadier spot, but that's where I had room for him in the garden, so he's gonna tough it out, and he is growing pretty tall. He's almost gonna reach that tree and start climbing up this pecan tree right here. Isn't that neat? My cucamelon is a hot mess over here. I haven't trained him whatsoever, so he's doing all sorts of things. So just gonna let that grow. I wanted him to climb up this trunk, but he doesn't want to do that, so we'll see what happens. And then of course the parsley doesn't love this hot weather. You can see is very unhappy, but it is going to seed. It's blooming flowers, and we will be able to get parsley seeds from this plant and plant new parsley next season. My corn this week, it's getting really big. Now this has got to be about knee level here. It's grown so much this week. I think corn just really likes the hot weather. It was really windy this week, and what I did was, to help protect the corn from blowing over, is I put 4 posts, and I have made this like checkerboard pattern out of jute string, and so each corn has its own like pod, so to speak. So when it gets really windy, these little squares that the corn is in helps keep it from blowing over. And then of course I have a couple stakes in the main part, so that's going to help. Corn has a really shallow root system, so when it gets really windy, it's easy for them to blow over. So hopefully this will help keep our corn growing. I will keep you updated if this works. I think as the corn gets taller, I'm going to add more layers of this jute string, so it will help, is my goal. I think this corn is really pretty, especially this one over here with that nice variegated leaf pattern. Most of the other ones are solid green, but this one in the corner is also a little striped. He is growing next to a marigold, so these two are competing, but I really want more pollinators, so I'm hesitant to take him out. I actually forgot that I had a corn in this corner when I planted the marigold. I knew I wanted to plant a marigold in the corner, and it must have slipped my mind when I was sowing the corn, because I thought that I had left this corner blank for a pollinator, and then the corn started coming up, and I'm like, oh my goodness, what did I do? So they are basically growing out of the same area. I'm going to let them do what they want to do, because the corn doesn't look too stunted compared to the other corn, and the marigold is growing as well. So we'll see if we get corn and flowers from that little spot. My zucchini is doing really, really well. I have a dark green zucchini and a black beauty zucchini right here. They have really surprised me with how much they're growing. I actually had to prune these back a lot this week, which you can see here. I had leaves growing, and the leaves were actually covering this marigold, and then I had leaves that were covering the corn, so I just snipped them at the base, and I think the zucchini's growing even faster now because I cut off some areas where it was having to put energy into growing leaves. Now it is able to grow even more. But the really cool thing about the good thing about pruning your squash is that it promotes airflow at the base of the plant. It's going to keep the plant a little bit healthier, and it's also going to promote better pollination, because once these flowers bloom, the pollinators, like bees, they're really attracted to that yellow color of the flower, so they're going to have an easier access into the plant. And if this was just full of leaves, it would actually be a physical barrier that would prevent some pollination. So you'd be more prone to things like blossom rot. You would have just pollination issues. And so this is going to help the plant breathe better, and it's also going to help it fruit better. So if you haven't already and you're growing squash, it's a good idea to go and prune out some of those lower leaves. I might come back and do a few more. I think that this leaf is an issue. Every now and then when it blows to the other side of the wire, it's competing with that corn. So I'm probably going to take that leaf out. And then, of course, any leaves that I see that are really bug damaged, I also go ahead and remove those, because there's plenty of leaves for this plant to grow. My marigolds over here are doing pretty good. This one's growing up over its old flower. Whenever this flower starts to dry out, I am going to deadhead it, which means I'll just snip off the flower, and that's actually going to help the plant put more energy into growing more flowers. And I just think it's really neat to see when these marigolds first blossom. They're like a really, really dark burgundy, and as the flower ages, it turns into a lighter color, almost like an orange yellow. So this flower's actually been open for a few days now. So it is lighter than it was when it first opened, but it's still really pretty. I think it'll be really nice when we have this full of flowers to see the different stages of flower bloom, from anywhere from really dark red up to a nice light orange, and that's just gonna look really pretty right there. And I have another, this is the same kind of marigold, the bolero, where this one's blooming too, and he's just gorgeous flower. I love it. And then the one in the middle is another bolero, and it's starting to put a flower out, but it's a little later. I think it's having to compete between my two ground cherries a little more. It's shaded a lot more, so he's growing a little slower, but he'll catch up, and then soon we'll have a lot of really pretty flowers in this garden bed. My ground cherries have really blown me away. I'm surprised with how much that they've grown this week. I've heard that ground cherries are slower to start and slower to grow than other plants of their type, and it does make sense. I mean, they're related to the tomatillo, and they are much smaller and have grown much slower than my tomatillos and my blue beauty tomatoes, but they are still growing really fast, and they're getting nice and big. They are flowering prolifically. There's flowers everywhere on this plant. So I can't wait to try. This is the Aunt Molly's ground cherry. So it's going to be a really sweet tart little fruit. It looks just like a tomatillo, but it's yellow and it's tiny and it's really sweet, and we can't wait to try it. I've never actually eaten a ground cherry before, but it's a beautiful plant, and I'm thinking I'm going to add this to my garden every year if we like it, because it's just beautiful. And anywhere I see leaves that don't look very good, I'll just pluck those off. Over here we have our 2 Blue Beauty tomatoes that I grew in the ground. So this year I did an experiment where I grew a few in the ground, I grew a few in a raised garden bed, and I grew some in buckets. And I'm just kind of seeing what goes better in our region out here in West Texas. We're zone 8B. This is in the Chihuahuan Desert. It's a very dry place. So what I'm doing with these is these are actually in part shade. They get shaded for about half of the day. And then my tomatoes over here are in full sun for most of the day. And then the tomatoes in the front garden get early morning sun and afternoon shade. And then these get early morning shade and afternoon sun. And I'm just kind of seeing what's going to do okay here. I know there's a lot of variables, so it's not very scientific, but that's okay. Now, this tomato has really surprised me, and it's made me really hopeful. So if you've been following this journey, you will know that about a week ago we had a massive windstorm, and this tomato completely snapped in half. And he is still really injured, and it is touch and go with this guy. If you look down at the base of his root system, right there is where he snapped in half. And if I were to take away this tomato stake, and I do wiggle it every now and then and try to see if he'll support himself, he will not. He will still break in half if I were to take that stake out. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to like graft him onto himself, and hopefully that wound will heal. Now he is very, very healthy. His leaves are really nice. He is still producing a little bit of new growth. I did pinch off all of his flowers, or anywhere that I see flowers I am pinching off, because I don't want him to put energy into growing fruit if he can't even stand up for himself. So while he's healing, I am just going to go and take off all the flowers so he puts more energy into trying to grow and heal. And like right here, he has a sucker. So we're going to pinch off that sucker and hope that he puts a little more energy into growing. So I am surprised that he's still alive. With a broken main stalk, I would have thought he would have died by now, but we're going to be hopeful and see what he does. If he wants to make it, he has a room in our garden, and if he doesn't, then I'll pull him out and plant something else. But for now, this little tomato is a fighter. So stay tuned. I'll keep updating on this one right here. The one next to him, he is doing really good. You can see this one's a little healthier versus the struggle, but we are still surprised with how well that one's doing. This one I am trying to push in this direction towards the trellis, because eventually I want to tie him to that lattice so that the same fate doesn't happen as this little guy right here. And we are on to our cute Hungarian black jalapenos. These are extremely stunted compared to the other jalapenos that we have in the garden. I think what happened with these is where I had them, I sowed the seeds in a greenhouse, and I actually had a heat blanket underneath my tray of seeds because I started these in early February. And I think if I could go back, this is my first year gardening, I've learned a lot, and I've learned that things like peppers and eggplants you should start later because they do better when the temperatures are warmer. So most of my jalapenos and peppers and eggplants are doing really well, but what I think stunted these is that on the heat mat where I had the tray, these 3 were on the edge of that mat. So I think they were exposed to a little bit cooler weather, which has stunted their growth. So if y'all are growing jalapenos, I would suggest waiting until it's warmer or really having a nice warm area for them to start growing. So they did germinate, they are growing. I put them in this pot and they do have a home in our garden, but we learned from our mistakes, and I want these guys to be a reminder to me that peppers like hot temperatures, and if they're exposed to cold weather, they will not grow as well. But I love these guys. I think it's cute. They have their own little pot. If they give me any peppers at all, I'm going to be really happy. And if they don't, I do think that they're a beautiful addition to our garden. My fennel struggled this week. Doesn't like the hot, but he is still producing new growth. So we're going to let him go and do what he wants to do. He is covering my black pansies, which I think is a good thing because black pansies don't like the hot weather. So he's giving them a little bit of shade. And then right here I have just flowers that I have pollinators growing. Not everything in this area has germinated yet, so I'm probably going to reseed and see what I can get out of these. We have some convolvulus, which is, I believe, a type of morning glory type flower. We have petunias, a couple bachelor buttons. I have another poppy, which is what this is right here, and some daisies, impatiens. I'm so impatient about growing my impatiens. They're so pretty, and I think at this point, if they do grow, it might be too late. They don't like the hot, so we might grow impatiens in the fall if they don't come up pretty soon. My petunias are finally coming up, and this is really funny, but I have a ton of wild petunias growing in the front yard. So I go outside and I look at my petunias out front, and I'm so jealous that they just decided to grow out there taunting me, because I've tried so hard to grow petunias from seed, and this is probably my 4th attempt this year, and you see my success, and then I can just walk out front and see dozens of petunias in my front yard. It's kind of funny. But my zinnia right here is growing nice and big. That's going to be a beautiful flower here in a few weeks probably. My sweet peas I put here as a beautiful smelling flower, and he is getting a little scalded by the sun. So hopefully he does pretty good. I know in general peas like cool weather, so good luck, little pea. So for now, my sweet peas are hanging in there. I really want them to flower soon so that I can smell that beautiful classic sweet pea fragrance. They are still putting off new growth, so even though they are sun scalding, I hope they're going to hang in there for a little bit longer. My chickens are scratching at stuff this morning. This is my Art Combs Ancient Watermelon, which I'm actually really, really excited about this year. He's throwing off arms in every direction, and he even has started to grow out of the pot and along the ground now. The one in the front is actually flowering, and this one seems to be putting more effort into growing out, and he hasn't started flowering yet, but I know he'll flower soon. So the Art Combs Ancient Watermelon is a type of watermelon that we've never grown before, and I haven't eaten one yet, but I'm really excited to try it. It is from Arizona, and it was found in a cave, and the seeds were hundreds or thousands of years old. So it's called ancient watermelon. The skin, the rind of this watermelon is dark green, and it's not striped, and some of them even have like a gooseneck, where it's like a round watermelon with a long neck on the end of them. So we're excited to grow it and see what kind of fruit we can get. But other than that, the flavor is of a classic watermelon, but it's really a neat New World type watermelon. I did go ahead and all around this pot I have sowed flower seeds to see if we could get any more pollinators, because I haven't seen a whole lot of bees in the garden this year. So these are going to come up a little later in the season and give us some flowers. Right here we have what looks like a marigold that has germinated. I also think I saw a zinnia underneath here that's growing up in the shade, so that's going to be pretty neat. And then under here, that to me looks like a Mexican mint. So I did plant them in a circle, but as I've watered, they have washed around a little bit. So we're getting germination all over this pot. But I think it'll be pretty if they do flower, for us to have all different color flowers, different kinds of flowers in this pot growing up and through this ancient watermelon. My kale is doing really nicely. It's a very happy kale. I have another little black king pansy. He has grown a little bigger, but I think he's getting more sun than the two over there. So these are growing a lot taller, and this one is growing slow and steady. He is going to start getting shade from this watermelon though, so I think that'll help him in the heat of the summer, because pansies like to grow in cooler weather. My broccoli is hanging in there. Every now and then he's a little droopy, I think just getting the heat of the day. But in this spot, this is one of the shadier spots of the garden. So he's doing pretty good. We have eaten a few of the leaves, and broccoli, their leaves are a lot like cabbage to me. So if you do plant your broccoli in the spring, you probably won't get florets off of it if you don't live in an area where it's nice and cool in the early spring, because they do need cool temperatures for them to throw their flowers off. So what we're doing is we're really growing broccoli for its leaves this season. And if we plant broccoli in the fall, then by the next spring we'll get some broccoli florets to eat and have that traditional broccoli. This is the early sprouting purple broccoli, so it does look a little different than a normal broccoli, but we like him. I have a couple more zinnias in this pot, and I planted alyssum in both of these, and we have one flower seed that has germinated. So, I mean, we did plant them just a couple weeks ago. We might have more that come up, but I'm really excited about that alyssum. Alyssum's a really nice flower, and I've heard that once you get it going, it can be really invasive in your garden space. So we'll see what happens. My rainbow chard is still doing really good. I have been eating on this one quite a bit, and I've been picking leaves for the chickens every now and then. They also really like rainbow chard. I think I'm gonna pull out my red romaine this week, and I have been feeding it to the chickens just because it's not doing well in this heat. It's wilting quite a bit, and I do give it water and it comes back every day, but it's not happy. So I learned my lesson here. Really start romaine early in the season. I've heard that it does better in cooler weather, but I just figured it'd be fine. And it really does like the cooler weather. So that's probably going to slowly come out this week and be fed to the chickens. My blue butterfly pea is really healthy. I did put up this foam mat. I'm going to end up putting some chicken wire here, but in a pinch I realized that the chickens would easily stick their head through and eat that plant in one bite. So until I put something up, I put my little knee pads floor mat in between the chicken fence and the garden so that they wouldn't eat my blue butterfly pea. So next week you'll probably see some nice chicken wire right here so that my chickens don't eat my sole blue butterfly pea that I've tried so hard to grow this year. The blue butterfly pea, if you guys are new to our channel, it is a flowering plant that promotes really beautiful blue blossoms that you can use as a natural food coloring, or you can use it as a dye. It's a really rich, deep blue colored flower. My cucamelons this week are doing really, really good. So I just need to be more patient next season. I heard that cucamelons start off slowly, but I still was so excited about them and wanted them to grow really fast, so I was pushing them. But just leaving them alone for a few weeks, I really haven't looked at these guys too much, because it really is like watching a pot try to boil. The more you watch it, the slower it looks like it's growing. So coming back to these, I haven't put any energy into trying to make them grow in any direction except for when they try to hit this back fence, because if they touch the fence, the chickens will eat them. And they have been eating on that one a little bit because he kind of tries to grow towards the fence. But the other two have gotten the idea, and they're starting to grow up. They do have some arms reaching towards each other and some arms coming out this direction. So I'm thinking this season we're going to be hunting for our cucamelons because they're going to start probably growing under there and back behind the rock. And so it'll be fun, like Easter egg hunt, trying to find where our cucamelons have decided to grow fruit. But I think that's part of the fun gardening. And as a person, I generally am a micromanager and I like to be in control of everything. So this in the garden, plants like these where they just don't listen to you and want to do what they want and grow in the opposite direction you tell them to, it's good. It's good for me to be able to just let that control go a little bit over here. Back to the first garden, I did want to show y'all my tomatillos this week. They are massive. Just a couple days ago, they were at probably belly button level, and now they're up to like mid-chest level height. I don't know how to, like, that's not very technical if you're, I'm a pretty tall person. I'm 5'9", 5'8". I guess I'm 5'8". So this is probably a 3.5, 4 foot tall plant, just eyeballing it. My tomatillos are one of my favorite plants in the garden this year. And with that windstorm that we got a few days ago, I did come back and reinforce these guys. Originally, I just had them staked with a little piece of bamboo on each plant to kind of help them, if it got windy, that they can lean on something. But with gusts of 50 miles an hour, I just didn't think that that was going to cut it. And it wasn't a risk I wanted to take with how much we invested our time and energy into making these tomatillos really healthy. And they really are generally a healthy plant. I don't mean to say that we had to work hard to keep them healthy, but this was a months-long process growing them to be this big. And I didn't want them to snap and be stunted like this one, or have to struggle or potentially die if they got broken in the wind. So what I did this week is I added these little tomato cages, and I modified it. Each one of these tomato cages is supposed to be 3 poles and like a triangle, and y'all can see in the front bed, I'll show y'all when we go look at the tomatoes up there, how those cages are supposed to work. But what I did was I bought multiple cages and just kind of did 4 poles on one side, 4 poles on the other side, and have secured them into like one rectangle sized cage around all 3 of my tomatillos. And I already showed y'all in the video about preparing my garden for wind, but this backside is a lot more open to let the plants grow more freely, because anywhere where a plant has to rub against a structure that's foreign to them, it's going to chafe on the plant, and it's also going to make the plant a little weaker. If it has to lean on something, it's not having to hold itself up as much. So it's not going to be as strong of a plant, in my opinion. So all of these plants, even though they are caged, they are a good distance away from the cage at the base. So they are having to hold themselves up on their own. None of the main branches are resting on the cage. So really, when the wind blows really hard, the smaller branches out reaching and the leaves are going to be what touches the cage, and it's going to kind of cushion the plant from being pushed around too much in the heavy wind. It's going to help hold it up if it needs it, but in general, I want these tomatillos to hold themselves up on their own so that they'll be stronger. These 3 plants are extremely prolific with flowers, and I'm really hopeful that they are getting pollinated. I have seen some solitary bees. I haven't seen any honeybees in my garden this year, which is a little concerning, but I have seen really, like, we have these tiny bees. I don't even know what they're called. They look like flies, but I think they are bees. And then I've seen some other really neat bees. Out here in West Texas, we have a lot of different kinds of bees. So I couldn't tell you what is pollinating them, but I do see them in the flowers, so I'm hoping we'll get some tomatillos over here. I actually saw yesterday that we have a solitary bee that's living in this hole of this tree trunk right here. And yesterday when I was out here in the late afternoon looking at my garden, that bee was really angry with me. He kept coming and checking me out and buzzing around me, or she did, and I just left her alone, and I really want her to stick around so that she can start pollinating all of my flowers. I have seen a lot of good predators, good beneficial bugs on my tomatillo plant. I think I just look at my tomatillo plant a little more than some of my others. I'm sure they're on the other plants too, but I have seen some lacewings and some small young praying mantises and ladybugs also on this plant. If you haven't heard of lacewing, it's actually a bug that we order every year online and release into the yard because we don't like to use pesticides. So the lacewing, when it's a larval stage, when it's young, it eats aphids, it eats whiteflies, so it's a good natural predator to have. And then after a few weeks, it emerges into a flying insect. It looks, if you look at it, it looks kind of like a little dragon. It's like a long green bug, and its wings are see-through. So it's called a lacewing. And as an adult, it eats nectar. So it will be a dual-purpose bug in the garden. It puts out little larval bugs that are predators, and then as an adult, it's a pollinator. So we actually have some that we're waiting on to come in the mail that we are going to put into the garden. And once we put the lacewings in the garden, I'm going to be taking down my sticky traps, and I'm going to be relying on those bugs to keep bad insects like aphids and whiteflies out of my garden, or at least keep their numbers down a little bit. So I think that'll be really neat. Let's see if we can see a few tomatillo flowers. It is still really early in the morning. When it is shaded, the tomatillo will have its flowers closed, but when it's in full sun and later in the day, this flower will open up and be beautiful. It's like a nice star-shaped yellow and gray flower. So these tomatillo plants are covered in flowers. So I'm really hoping that we get tomatillos out of these to try. I want to make my own, I'm going to say purple enchiladas. Most of the time tomatillos are used to make the green sauce that you have when you eat green enchiladas. These are purple tomatoes, so we're going to have purple enchiladas. It's pretty neat. My okra in this corner is growing pretty well. I planted him a few weeks ago. He had a little bit later start to the season, but that's what okra needs because okra loves hot weather and loves direct sunlight. So he's actually growing a lot faster than that first okra that I planted earlier in the season. All around this okra, and you can't really tell because it has a lot of debris that have fallen from our pine tree and our pecan tree, but I have planted some green basil along the backside and some pollinating flowers around the front end. And we do have some germination, although I do notice that a couple of the sprouts that I saw earlier in the week look like they were picked from birds, so hopefully those will come up a little bit. I did plant a vinca, or I bought a vinca. I didn't grow this one from seed. I got this one started from our local garden center. And what I'm going to do with the vinca is right now I'm hardening him off, but once he is settled into our home, I'm going to pull him apart, and I think this is like 3 plants, and I'm going to plant this one around my red bell pepper plant that I have in the front yard to help pollinate up front. I have my cantaloupe, and he's growing out a lot more this week compared to past weeks that we've had. So he has had a little later start than the rest of my garden as well. I direct sowed him about the time that I was putting my starts transplanted into the garden. So he's a lot smaller than the other squash I have, but he is starting to reach up towards the trellis, and he does have a little tendril that is holding on to that T-post. So he's already grabbing on, and he's going to start growing up onto this trellis to grow me some yummy cantaloupe. I did have to push out my chicken wire about a foot, and then I used a brick over there to push it out, and I am going to end up putting hardware cloth when I can get some to help prevent these chickens from eating my squash. But they really have been trying to eat my squash. You can see right here they had eaten off an arm for my squash and everything. So I did heavily prune this section about 2 days ago, and I still probably need to go back and prune more, but I didn't want to do too much at one time. And I did notice that since I pruned off of all of these plants, they have all started flowering. So my acorn squash in the middle had already been flowering with some beautiful, gorgeous yellow flowers. But my butternut is also starting to flower, and this Jardale pumpkin over here has now decided to flower as well. So, and then Jardale, he's wild. Look at this. He's growing towards my cucamelons. But I'm gonna let him do what he wants to do. That arm was actually growing out this way, and over the course of about a week I had moved him to here and then eventually out here, because if he grows up behind the okra, the chickens are for sure gonna eat that arm. So I want him to grow this way so he has a little more protection and he can grow some pumpkins back there or under here. And then my okra, this was the first okra I planted, and he's doing really good. He has some flower buds that have been growing for a while now. I hope he's gonna flower soon, because the flowers on an okra plant are just really beautiful. What's neat about this okra plant is that he follows the sun. So in the morning his leaves will, once the sun really starts hitting him, they'll turn this way, and as the sun rises and until it sets, he's gonna turn, and he follows the sunlight. And it's really neat. On to this really nice garden bed that I just love to come over and look at. When I think of gardening, like, this is kind of what I picture, just this green, lots of different types of plants. I know over here it's kind of like a forest. It has gone out of my control, but this looks like that classic garden. I have my listada begonias in the front, these 4 plants right here, and overall they've grown really well. The one in the back corner is still struggling. That's the one that kind of snapped its stem during the windstorm, so he has slowed down on growth. He is still putting off new growth, but the other 3, which were smaller before the windstorm, have taken over and surpassed him in size. Listada begonia is a type of eggplant that has a soft, succulent skin, and it's supposed to be less bitter than some other varieties of eggplant. And its skin is striped purple and white. Most of the time when you go to the grocery store, you see an eggplant, it is like a really dark purple, almost a black color. Well, these eggplants are really beautiful, a lighter purple striped with white. And you can see they're pointed up this morning. It is probably in the 70s right now, and the sun is just now coming up, and they are pointed up. So that shows that they are probably a little cold, and once the sun really hits them, they will relax and their leaves will go down. And eggplant thrives on warm weather. They love the warm weather. But every morning I come out here and the plants are pointed up like this, and then they will relax as the day goes on. So I do think I planted my eggplant and my peppers too soon. If we garden next year, I mean, we're going to garden next year. I just don't know what size garden it's going to be, because we are planning on moving some point. So we don't know how established we're going to be. But if we are able to do a big garden next year, I'm going to start all of my peppers and my eggplants later. And I think they're going to grow much faster next year. And they're going to benefit from a slower start, a later start, just because they like warm temperatures. We did get a little hairy a couple weeks ago. We got some unseasonably cool, almost freezes a couple weeks ago, and so things like that can really dampen the growth on your pepper and eggplant plants. So, but these guys are doing well. They are trying to flower. Let me see, I will show you. There is a blossom right there that's going to bloom pretty soon. And there's blossoms on, I think, the 3 plants that are doing really well. And then my opal purple basil is doing pretty good. It did get some splashback. Yesterday I turned the hose on and I accidentally sprayed all of the plants for like a second right here. And then with as much wind as we get out here in West Texas, dust covers everything. So the dust stuck to all of the little water droplets on these plants. Generally, I only I only bottom water plants. I never spray the plants. I would never come over here and spray the garden because that's going to promote disease, and moisture sitting on plants is not good. So whenever I water directly at the roots of the plant, the base of the plant. So it does look kind of cool, these little dust spots, but yeah. So basil's doing pretty good this week. I have been harvesting a little from him because I don't want him to be leggy. So if you just pinch off the top whenever he has new growth, it'll start to try to grow more out than up, and he'll be a stronger plant. I have my 5 jalapenos. The 2 right here are black Hungarian. It's going to grow purple flowers and purple peppers. And then the 3 right here are brown jalapenos, and those jalapenos are going to be brown. My purple black Hungarian pepper is going to flower pretty soon, and you can see a nice purple flower starting to bud. So we're really excited about that. I haven't seen any buds on my brown jalapenos yet, and I think the black Hungarians are a little taller. They're growing just a little faster, but that's okay. I don't need all of these to flower and bloom at the exact same time. We have a long season out here in West Texas. They can take their time. In fact, we are really early with our peppers this year. I planted them way too soon, so they can take their time. I have my 4 albino bell peppers right here, and they are dealing with their leaf curl, which I do believe is due to overwatering early in the season. They are much more stunted than my jalapenos. They were keeping up at the same age until they got to this height, and then my jalapenos have jumped up and the peppers haven't grown too much. I used to water every day when they were in the greenhouse, and then I went down to every other day, and by the time I planted these in the garden, I was mostly watering every 3 days, unless it was a really hot day and the leaves of other plants were starting to wilt, and then I would make an exception and plant every other day. But what I'm starting to do with the bell peppers is I'm only watering my bell peppers and my jalapenos once a week, and they were all curly leaves, and now some of the leaves are healthy. So that to me shows that it was an overwatering issue. So I'm going to continue to water these once a week and see if any of these other leaves start to look a little healthier. I did notice that once I went from watering every 3 days to once a week, we are getting more growth. And in the last week, this plant has put on about 6-7 inches of growth. So I was worried. I know that leaf curl can stunt your plants, and it can make you have deformed flowers and deformed fruits. So I'm hoping that I caught it early enough on that we are still going to get a good productive season with these bell peppers. They are starting to flower. Beautiful white flowers. So we're looking forward to having some white bell peppers this year. My nasturtiums are doing really good. In fact, this one has a flower bud, and it looks like it's going to be an orange flower, so we're really excited. I'm really happy with these nasturtiums. They've grown nice and round and very full and big, and they're doing very well. I've heard from a few people that nasturtiums don't like the heat, that they won't do well mid-season in a hot climate if they're in full sun, but these nasturtiums so far have been putting up with the 95-degree weather. It looks like they're growing round, and it's a way to shield the inside of the plant. All of these leaves on the outside are taking the brood of the sunlight, and then the middle of the plant is protected. So that's interesting to see. I do have more nasturtiums in the front that are in part shade, and they're not doing nearly as well. They're getting the heat of the day, but not the sunlight, and they are really light colored and kind of leggy but stunted. So I'm not really sure what's going on. Maybe this garden just had a better quality soil. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on up there, but I have a sunflower in the corner of this bed, and he's going to flower soon, but he's going to get really big probably here in the next few weeks. And then what I've been most excited about this season my Blue Beauty tomatoes. My Blue Beauty tomatoes have actually started setting fruit this week, and I want to show you some of their fruit. We have tomatoes. I think that the one right here is going to be gnarly. He already looks like he's kind of weird shaped. And over here, look at this guy. That's just a beautiful. So the Blue Beauty tomato is a tomato where when the fruit grows, places where it is getting hit with direct sunlight, the skin of the fruit is going to turn blue or like a purple color. And this tomato is still going to ripen to red, but all of those areas where it gets direct sunlight that turn blue, it's going to be blue. So it's kind of like a multicolored, neat beefsteak tomato. You can already see there's some blue color on that tomato. So we're really, really excited about this variety of tomato. I'm really happy that I picked something neat that you can't get in the grocery store, because it is hard, like when you grow a garden and you're waiting for it to grow, and then it just, you know, like it takes months, and then you feel like you need to go to the store, like tomatoes are so cheap, but then you come out here and you see something like these Blue Beauty beefsteak tomatoes and think, wait a second, I can't get that at the grocery store. Like it makes it that much more worth it, and it makes gardening that much more rewarding and fun. So we have some Blue Beauty tomatoes. Now it'll probably be several weeks before we harvest any of these tomatoes, but it's going to be really neat to watch their growth and see how they develop. Oh, look at that. A little lacewing that we were just talking about just flew up and landed on this plant. Mr. Lacewing or Miss Lacewing, I really want you to pollinate my flowers. Hang around as long as you want. Those are really beneficial bugs to have in the garden. And it's neat. We released some lacewings last year, and we're seeing them come back this year, so that is encouraging. All right, so I want to go ahead and show y'all the front yard garden. So let's go take a look over there. Let's go out this way. Oh, and something I haven't really shown you guys is our table of succulents. We love cactus and succulents, and they do grow really well out here in West Texas. It's like a natural environment for them. Hot weather, dry heat. We were really into cactus last year, and we had about 50 potted succulents. And over the course of the winter and early spring, we did give a lot of those plants away. And a few of them didn't make it through the winter. We had a weird winter. So I know like this zebra succulent didn't make it this year, but a lot of our plants did. And so let's see, we have our ocotillo, and this ocotillo was about this big last year, and it's grown quite a bit. We have more ocotillo over here. And ocotillo are native to the Chihuahuan Desert, so they grow wild all over the place around here, and it's definitely probably my favorite cactus succulent type plant in the world. So the ocotillo will look dead even when it's alive, and then whenever there is a desert rain, they will bloom flowers, and then when it gets really hot, they'll lose all of their flowers again, and then when it rains, they'll flower again. So it's a really neat plant that is extremely what is the word? It's extremely, goodness, I can't think of it, reactive. It's reactive to the weather out here where it lives. So we have been watering it. It is flowering. It also is really neat. These are too young to bloom, but a lot of the ocotillos in our area are actually blooming, and they bloom at the very top of the plant, and it's a pretty pink flower. And look at my wild chickens over there. What are you girls doing? You look like you're up to no good. They will bloom at the top, and they bloom right around the time that our hummingbirds are migrating. So it's almost like a little oasis in the desert where they can come, and it's like a little, like a gas station for the little hummingbirds to refuel on their migratory journey. It's really neat. Ocotillos are amazing plants, and we love having them out here in the Chihuahuan Desert. And we have some other cactus. The aloe is stressed, and it's coming back from the winter. It's been purple all winter, but now it is turning green and getting new growth. Have some spineless prickly pear. And this right here is a chili pekin. And chili pekins, it's a type of pepper plant that grows native in this area, and we have them all over the place. I actually, when we moved in, we had 2 plants already established in this yard, and one of them we have over in the chicken area we've protected so they don't eat it. And then another one we have is this little plant that's growing under the crepe myrtle. Is a pekin. And pekin plants, even though they like the hot and the desert, they like to grow in the shade of another plant. So that's really neat. And the one over here is starting to come back too. I should have trimmed him back, but he's starting to come back. I might need to protect him because the chickens will eat his leaves. I see you, girls. I see you. They're asking me for food, which they have plenty of food, but they like special treats. So the chili pekin, it is a plant that grows to be, the peppers are about half the size of my pinky fingernail. And this plant was a volunteer that we found in the yard last year. And we planted it in a pot, and it grew to be just a huge plant. And it dies back in the winter, and we did cut it back down to a crown, and it's starting to come back. My chickens are begging for treats. You girls. And Pip is mean. She bites. She's like sitting here biting my feet. Hey, cut it out. She's pecking my feet. So the chili pekin, it's a really fun plant to grow because whenever your friends come over, you can give them this really cute, tiny pepper and say, hey guys, you want to try this little pepper? And it is one of those things where if you get tricked into eating a pekin pepper, you will mark it down as one of your life regrets for the rest of your life. No, just kidding. It is a really spicy pepper though. To me, they feel like they're about 3 times hotter than a habanero, those little tiny peppers. If you stick it in your mouth, you will know exactly where that little pepper touched your tongue for a long time. But we love them. They're actually really good. The way we harvest pekin plants is we dry them and we crush them into a red pepper flake. And that's a good way to eat them. We have some more cactus. These are beautiful. They're going to open up nice and big once the sun hits them. And then this big boy is a compass cactus. And they're really cool. They point the same direction, all of them. So that's why it's called a compass cactus. If you get lost in the desert, they all will point that direction. And this is a little one. He's too little to start pointing, but it's also called a fishhook compass cactus for good reason. Those little barbs are curled. And it takes a couple decades for these guys to flower, so you know this big boy is pretty old. He has dozens of flowers on him. I will come back and give you girls treats in a minute. They're following me around. Right here I had planted a Thunbergia. I am going to reseed him. This pot got knocked over and then afterwards overwatered, and I do think that the seeds are not in that pot anymore. So I'm going to reseed, and hopefully we'll get a little bit of black-eyed Susans out of that guy. This is the pot I was talking about with those nasturtiums that aren't doing quite as well. You can see their leaves are much more pale. They're not as big, but then I notice everything in this pot is a little more pale. My watermelon, this is another Art Combs Ancient Watermelon, is really pale, and my sunflower is also pale, but it is putting out a flower, and everything is growing. Evie, what are you doing? What are you doing? Everything is growing, so I am going to watch these. I might fertilize them. I think I said I was going to fertilize them last week, and I just haven't yet, so What is it, my love? So, so that's what's happening over here. My Art Combs Ancient Watermelon is flowering. It's a really pretty yellow flower. And he has several flowers along the arm that have already dried up, so I'm hoping that he's going to get pollinated, and he is putting off a lot of new growth. What is it? She's being super clingy. All right. This cucamelon is growing nice and big, and he's putting off arms all over the place. And every day I have to put him up on the stalk because he is a little stubborn cucamelon. And then over here I do have an acorn squash. It's a little leggy, but I think I left him in the greenhouse a little too long. But he's gonna do good, and I can't wait to get hopefully some acorn squash out of him. So I successfully trained my pumpkin to grow this direction. He was trying to grow out that way, and every day for about a week I was pushing him more this way until he finally got the hint. But now that he's gone this way, I think he's gonna try to go back. So I'm gonna keep being like, dude, move this way. You have plenty of space. I want him to kind of fill out this area, but I don't want him to grow that way. So I want him to flower too. My other pumpkin is already flowering, and this guy, he has more space and more water, and he is not flowering yet. But this pumpkin is one of my favorite things this year. And my goodness, what happened here? Oh no. So in these 3 cups, I have some herbs that I had been really struggling to grow this season. I've direct sowed them several times, and finally I got some seeds to germinate. We have some lavender, and this is a toothache plant. Toothache plant's really cool. When you chew on the flowers, it numbs your mouth, so it's considered a medicinal. And then I have mint with dog hair, of course, because we have dogs that shed a lot. And I'm probably going to give the rest of this to the chickens today and start a new round of chicken forage, because this one's looking pretty sad. And I think the only thing that's still thriving is the grass in this cup. Oh my goodness, Evie. Oh. So my tomatillos over here, there's 2 in this pot. They were incredibly stunted, but now that I've moved them out into a pot, they are stretching their legs and growing nice and big. I don't think these are going to be the size of the tomatillos we have in the back garden because they are sharing a pot, but I do love tomatillos, and I didn't have the heart to rehome these this year. I was planning on rehoming them to my mother-in-law, but they haven't visited in a while. So when I was thinking about giving them to her, they were still in solo cups. And now I think it's going to be too big. So that's where that is. We have the husky cherry tomato right here, and his leaves are a little discolored, but he is a really strong plant, and he is growing really tall. I'm probably going to fertilize these this week, because I know pots and containers, you do need to fertilize a little more frequently. But he's flowering in a few different spots, and I am hopeful that we're going to get some husky red cherry tomatoes here in a little bit. This cherry tomato is not one that I started from seed. I got this one as a gift from work. My boss, I gave her a Jardel pumpkin and a ground cherry, and she gave me this really neat cherry tomato. And she also gave me some more tomato seeds, but those haven't germinated yet. So. And then we have these blue beauty tomatoes, and these 2 tomatoes are doing really good. This one struggled a lot when I first transplanted it. It wouldn't hold itself up at all, and now look at him. He is growing really nicely. I actually had to turn the pot because he was trying to just grow this way, and now he's kind of curving back. So he's really nice. And this one's really big and full and happy and flowering. So we're going to get some beefsteak tomatoes off these two guys also. Really excited. I have been pruning the bottom, but overall I haven't pruned the rest of the plant because I want these plants to be able to shade themselves. They don't have a lot of plants really close to them, and most of the time when the tomatoes grow out, they shade each other. And when they're really close to each other, you want to prune them so that they can have airflow between the plants so that they won't get sick. So I am promoting airflow at the bottom, but I also want them to shade themselves from the top. So I'm not pruning off the suckers on these like I would anywhere else in the garden. And then this is my red bell pepper plant that I was gifted as a 1-year working where I work gift from the really sweet, amazing people that I work with. And he's doing good. This plant has gotten a lot bigger just this week, and I'm excited to get some red bell peppers that will complement the white bell peppers we have in the back. And we have a cutting. I pruned my tomato plants, and with tomatoes you can actually, like if you were to cut off that stem, you can stick it in the ground and it will actually develop its own root system and essentially be a clone of the tomato that you clipped it from. So what I'm doing with this one is I'm growing him as a backup in case the other tomato that I showed you with the broken stem dies. I'll pull him out and then plant this guy over there. So this was about a 10-inch, 12-inch long stem, and I planted him almost all the way up to his crown and the dirt, because everywhere where he has this hairy fibers along the stem, he can actually develop roots. So he has established and he's making a life for himself in this pot, and he's looking really healthy. I thought he was gonna die because the day that I planted him in this pot, it was like 98 degrees outside, and I didn't think he was gonna make it, but I just watered him and looked away and didn't baby him so much, and when I came back, he was standing up nice and tall, and he turned out to be a healthy looking plant. So I'm hopeful that this tomato plant is going to establish and we can get some tomatoes off of him. This is a Blue Beauty beefsteak tomato. So he made it. We'll see how he does the rest of the season. He has a little bit of a late start compared to the other plants that are bigger, but our season's really long, so it's not too late to have tomato plants growing. And here we are. This is where I've been starting in most of my videos, and I decided to save this area for last this week. I have my Market More cucumber, which I have planted into the soil, and it has grown quite a bit this week. I think this one was a brand new leaf last week, and now it's having some new growth. I do plan on growing this up onto the trellis, and it'll be a nice little plant to give me some cucumbers. This plant I specifically planted in this spot because it gets the most moisture out of this garden bed. There's a slight grade in this direction where this area gets the most water, and it's right next to where the water comes out. So whenever the water comes out, this actually drips a little more than the rest of the drip line. And we have our humongous radish. This is a French breakfast radish that I've decided to let go to seed, and you can see the soil around this radish has just been pushed to the point of cracking, and of course more dog hair because so I'm keeping this radish here, and I actually went to the store and bought a lemon balm, and I also bought a sage. And the reason I did that is because I really wanted to grow these plants in my garden this year, and I've tried multiple times to unsuccessfully start these herbs. So herbs, I've had the least success, and look, a ladybug. With herbs, I've had the least success starting from seeds. So I went ahead and got a lemon balm and a sage, and I'm hardening those off, and they are going to be planted. The lemon balm likes part shade, so I'm going to plant him here and let this radish shade him until he gets nice and established. I do have my cantaloupe in the back, which is doing pretty good. He's also going to grow on the trellis. But yeah, you can see anywhere where I have little stakes of new herb seeds is just completely void of life. So I don't know, I'm gonna try to look into growing herbs, and it's just not been my forte this season. I've done really well with all of my produce, but herbs have just not been something that have grown really well for me this season. I have my cilantro, which is probably getting too much sun in this spot, but it's really strong, and I'm probably going to start harvesting some of him soon. This is the sage I bought at the store. I'm hardening him off before I plant him right here. I do still want to try some of these plants, but I do have the lavender in the solo cup I can plant here, and I have a toothache plant I can plant here. I'm going to reseed flax, and I'm going to reseed oregano. And then we have our Mexican mint. It's doing pretty good. And what I've done this week is, so last week I had this burlap shade material, and it was attached to the trellis to kind of shade at the middle of the day, because right at noon the sun hits right there. And I noticed that a lot of my herbs down here do not like the sunlight because it gets so hot and it's just too intense for them where we live. So I put up this shade cloth to kind of keep the heat of the day off of them. Evie loves to be in the center of attention. And it's been working so far, but I noticed that almost all of my little pole beans have reached the top of the trellis, and some have gone way up, and they're going to come back down. So I didn't want them to grow on the burlap, because my burlap is just to get them established. It's like a crutch, but it's not going to be here the whole season. I do want to take this burlap off in the next week or two completely. So what I did this week is I moved it away from the trellis. It was completely just tied onto it, but now my beans are filling out enough that I think they are going to shade those herbs from the direct sunlight. And then in a week or two, I'm going to just take that completely out, and we'll be able to see our lovely herb garden from start to finish. Over here I do have some serious blue sage and a catnip plant right there. I'm really excited about this catnip. It's just gorgeous. And then I have yarrow, which is doing really well. And in the back I planted a peppermint balsam. And the peppermint balsam is one of my absolute favorite plants this season. It has gorgeous serrated leaves and dog hair. And the flowers on a peppermint balsam are like white and red splash. Like, it's a really pretty plant. So it's doing good. It's adjusted really well here. I wanted it to be in shade because in the greenhouse I noticed when it was getting a lot of heavy direct sunlight, it was wilting. So here it's going to be having shade from the yarrow and from the pole beans. And I'm hoping we'll get some pole beans pretty soon, because these are growing nice and well on this trellis. Then of course we have our sunflowers that are getting close to flowering, and the cholla is doing good too. If y'all have made it this far, I want to tell you a really exciting thing. We are going to be adding a new animal to our little mini farm homestead. So it looks a little messy out here. These cardboard boxes are actually from packages that we've gotten shipped in for this new animal, and those stained wood are going to go into play with things that we're building for this new animal. So if you think you know what we're adding to the homestead, leave it in the comments below, and we will see here in the next few weeks. We're going to bring it home. We have actually been visiting this little new animal every single weekend for about the last 3 weeks, and new animal will be old enough to join our little homestead in a few more weeks. So we're really, really excited. We can't wait for you guys to find out. But until then, I hope y'all guys have some happy gardening adventures, doing the things you love, whatever your hobby might be. Just enjoy it. What is it, Evie? Evie's hobby is sunbathing and chewing on toys. Yeah. So we do have this new setup right here that I thought was really exciting. It is kind of funny having a couch. We actually found this couch. It was going to be thrown away, and I mean, we're like, outdoor couch, okay, that's cool. So we have put up some hooks up here, and we hang a full movie theater screen, and it hangs this whole area. And we have a projector that we just bought, and we have made this our home theater. So that's cool. We don't have to go to the movie theater during this COVID-19, and we can watch all of the movies we want from the comfort of our home, and we just turn the couch around and set it here, and we will sit back and enjoy watching movies, which is neat. We did put up a little bit of a screen to help block the sound and the lights from our neighbor, but that's it. So lots of new exciting things. I hope whatever y'all guys are doing, you are enjoying, you find a passion and pursue that. And I think it's time for me to give the girls some treats. So come on, girls, let's go. Come on. They know where I'm going. Oh, our lantanas are blooming. And the lantanas are native to where we live, so it's cool to have a nice pollinator. The chickens don't mess with the lantanas. Makes me think they might be slightly toxic to them, but it's really cool for attracting things like bees. Hey girls, you're stepping on my feet. So I'm gonna give them a little bit of alfalfa this morning. They're telling me they need some alfalfa. Come on, girls, let's go over here. You all following me? You guys gotta lay some good eggs for me. My girls, they actually lay pretty late. Most of them, we have about 2 that'll lay as soon as the sun comes up. But the rest of these girls, they will wait and lay more around like 9:30, 10 o'clock, 11, which is awful because where we live, it's just really hot. So hopefully they'll start laying earlier, but let me give them a little snack, motivate them. In fact, I might want to go ahead and check if we have any eggs already. So let me go see while they're eating. We have 3, 6, 7, 8. So we're missing 1 chicken. One of the red girls is probably laying right now. I'm gonna open it. I always tell them so they're not as alarmed that the ceiling to their nest box just opened randomly. And there we are, there's Miss Myrtle laying an egg. So that's a fake egg and that's a fake egg. So she might have something under her. That is not your egg, but I will take it. Thank you, Myrtle. This looks like a molly egg. It's actually that chicken right there. Amber whites lay the really pretty medium dark brown eggs. All right, well, I know this has been a long garden tour. We had a lot to show, and it was just really exciting how much growth we had this week. So you guys, into next week, I hope y'all have an amazing week with lots of success, and I will see y'all next Sunday for the week 7 garden tour. Thank you for watching.